It's good day to brew, baby. What is up? YouTube, it's your boy Millsy. Back with Hometown Commander, back for another episode of Millsy Brews, the show where I brew version 1.0 deckers of the commander in front of us in my quest to brew the magic world. You know the motto, baby. It's ABB, always be brewing, and that's what we're back to do today. The deck list is going to be down in the description for you below. As well as I'd really appreciate if you get interact with the video, like, comment, subscribe. Check out the links in the description. The Discord is up live, and we are chatting there if you want to come join us. But today, we're talking through our Tarkir commander of old. It would be hard to go through Sultai Week and not talk about Sidisi in some way. And so I thought it would only be right to talk about Sidisi. Brute Tyrant, probably one of the most popular commanders from old Tarkir, and one that's still very relevant now, especially with all the new Tarkir graveyard support. 4 mana, 3/3. Naga Shaman, whenever Sidisi enters the battlefield or attacks, we're going to mill 3 cards, which is a very huge thing, especially for her bottom ability. Whenever one or more creatures are put into our graveyard from our library, we make a 2/2 zombie token. So, of course, she helps us by milling herself, but of course we have plenty of other ways we can mill. And then we're going to talk about ways we could take advantage of things being in our graveyard, take away how we're going to get things back from our graveyard. Obviously, we're just filling up our graveyard full of stuff, so we want to make sure we have ways to get it back. And then Sidisi's making zombies, and there are zombies that care about the graveyard as well, so there's a lot of ways that we can just take advantage of the zombies being around as well. But I want to thank my channel members. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. If you're interested in seeing all of our videos just a little bit early for just $1 a month, check it out down below. But I think in the self-mill category, there's a lot of ways you could approach this. In fact, you'll see here through these couple slides, we're doing this in a lot of different ways. You have something like Glarb that lets you tap to Surveil too, so technically you can put things from your library into your graveyard. It also is going to help us just slightly extend our hand, allowing us to play lands and cast spells in mana value 4 greater from the top of our library. Grave Troll has Dredge. The way Dredge works is if this card's in our graveyard and we would draw, we can mill that many cards and return it back to our hand, just allowing us to get some of that nice mill and get a card back for it. Hermit Druid, probably one of the best pieces of self-mill that we have access to, and thankfully, right, now that I got that reprint in Sharded Masters, you can pay a green and reveal cards from the top until you hit a basic land. Put that card in your hand and other cards into your graveyard. Nice way to just mill a ton of cards at once, get them into your graveyard so that we could use them. Nyx Weaver just mills 2 cards at our upkeep. And the nice thing about Nyx Weaver is then we can actually pay 3 mana to exile it to bring something from our graveyard back to our hand. So not only does it put things in the graveyard, but it also lets us use it to stop that bleeding if we look at it that way, and then get something back. The new Taval feels great. Whenever it attacks, mill 3 cards that put a land from your graveyard back to the battlefield tapped. And then whenever more cards leave our graveyard, we make a zombie. So Sidisi cares about when they go in, Taval cares about when they leave out. And if you're interested in seeing Taval, we're going to cover Taval. Just a few more days, we're going to cover Taval in its own commander deck. Dread Summons is going to have each player mill X, and we make a zombie for each creature put into the graveyard. This is nice because we'll make these. We'll make one for ourselves. And then, we'll end up getting some extra value off of that. Life from the Loam is probably one of the easiest dredge cards to set up. So for 2 mana, you can return up to 3 land cards from our graveyard to our hand, and then it can dredge, right? Milling 3 and putting it back in our hand. Remember, the fun part about Life from the Loam is that you don't have to return any lands back to your hand. So technically, you could pay 2 mana just to put Life from the Loam into your graveyard so that you could dredge it on a future turn. Hedge Shredder mills 2 cards when it attacks if you want it to, but whenever one or more lands are put into our graveyard from our library, we get to put them back on the battlefield tapped. A good way to just take advantage of all those lands hitting our graveyard, right, bringing them back. Mesmeric Orb says whenever a permanent we control becomes untapped, that permanent's controller mills a card. This is a really interesting thing because it's going to mill our opponents, but I think the biggest key to Mesmeric Orb that is going to be slightly easy to miss is that when Sidisi says whenever one or more creature cards are put into your graveyard, make a zombie, what it's referring to is if a trigger would put more than one, or if an effect would put more than one in, that was it. Mesmeric Orb is actually going to cause a bunch of triggered abilities for each permanent you untap, meaning that you can make potentially a ton more zombies that way than if it was just, oh, you untap 5 permanents, mill that many cards. This is even better because you have a chance to mill more. You mill individually, meaning you have a chance to get more zombies out of it. Gossip's talent's kind of interesting. It has some interesting abilities, but I think level 1's interesting. Whenever a creature we control enters, we get to surveil 1. This means that anytime any creature comes in, we get to look at the top card of our library, right? Surveil is either put it back on top or put it into the graveyard. Well, this could mean that milling a creature and making a zombie could cause us to surveil 1 and make another zombie, right? So it's kind of nice just to be consistently churning through the top card of our deck, deciding where we want to put it. Do we want to keep it on top? Do we want to put it in the graveyard? Ripples on Death is another pretty great piece of self-mill. You're going to automatically mill at the start of your first main phase, but you get the choice. You could pay a mana of 3 life to put a card that was milled from among those 3 back to your hand. This is a really good ability because not only is it just milling you for sure every turn, but a mana and 3 life is very cheap compared to some of the other ways you can get a thing back, and you still get to have the fact that it was put in the graveyard, and then when we talk about graveyard matters, we can talk about paying off things leaving your graveyard. That card then left your graveyard, meaning you could pay that off as well. And then Sultai Ascendancy basically just has Surveil 2. This is before Surveil was coined, so it kind of has the actual written out way to Surveil 2, but basically just says Surveil 2 now. So it just allows you to get, again, some looks at the start of your upkeep on the cards that are on top. I think this, just like probably every other self-mill deck, you're talking about ways to get things in the graveyard, but now you want to talk about things either wanting to be in the graveyard or things leaving the graveyard. So you have things like Sir Conrad, that whenever another creature dies, a creature is put into our graveyard from anywhere other than the battle, or a creature card leaves our graveyard, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. So it cares about things going in, cares about things leaving. Conrad can be a nice source for some damage each game we see it on our opponents. Wonder just says when it's in our graveyard, all of our creatures, and we control an island, all of our creatures have flying. This is great because we want islands anyway, right? It's one of our colors. And, well, we can happily try to put Wonder in our graveyard to make sure that all of our creatures have flying, getting those zombies in the air and making them a threat. Insidious Roots, all of our tokens just tap for mana of any color. This is great since we want to be making those zombies, right? And then whenever one more creature cards leave our graveyard, we make a plant and put a counter on each plant we control. So we can start making this plant army as creature cards are leaving our graveyard, which is one of the easiest type of cards to get to leave the graveyard with some of the abilities we have. So this is great. I mean, it's just a double-sided, exact card of what we want, allowing our zombies to tap for mana and then getting value for something we probably want to do anyway. Polluted Cistern says whenever 1 more cards are put into our graveyard from our library, each opponent loses 1 life for each card type among them. This is great, right? The more cards we mill, the more chance we have to get our opponents for that. And we could just really take advantage of that. And then Tuval's Judgment, whenever 1 more cards leave our graveyard, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn, draw a card, make a treasure, or make a zombie. So again, could be getting value back from those things leaving our graveyard in so many different ways. But I think the easiest way to look at getting things back out of our graveyard is just how do we either cast things out of our graveyard or just get things back. And there's a lot of ways to do this in our colors. We have things like Havengul Lich. For mana, we can cast target creature card in a graveyard this turn. Whenever we cast it, it gets all activated abilities of that card until end of turn. Know that this will allow us to tap target creatures in opponents' graveyards, but mainly it can get ours, right? Getting any creature we want, casting it. So it's not like it comes back with finality counter or exiles at the end of turn. We just straight up can cast it out of our graveyard and care about that way. Kaga says whenever it attacks, it gets Death Touch and mill 2, but it says once during each of your turns, we can play a land or cast a permanent from among cards in your graveyard that were put there from your library this turn. So as we're milling, we can be playing things that we milled, right? Getting them back along the process. Lost Monarch of Ifnir does 2 really great things. 1, it gives all of our zombies afflict 3. So if our zombie were to attack and somebody blocked it, they would lose 3 life. And if a player was dealt combat damage by a zombie this turn, we get to mill 3 and return a creature card from our graveyard back to our hand. So it's going to be pretty easy to make this happen, especially with Afflict 3. Think about it. If you're swinging a bunch of 2/2s at somebody and they take 3 life if they block it and kill it, they may want to just let the zombie go through, effectively making sure that Lost Monarch of Ifnir goes off for us. Multi-Oath just lets us play a permanent of each type from our graveyard, so we can play lands and cast permanent spells. Again, great to take advantage of this just pile of a graveyard that's going to keep growing and growing. Raoul, Troubleshooter, kind of like Kaga, is going to let us play a spell from among cards that were milled this turn. Note, this is spell, not permanent, so we could actually play instants and sorceries if they get milled that way. 6 will let us pitch a land to play a non-land permanent in our graveyard, which is really nice, right? because we can get the land back other ways. But again, it might be important to get a creature or an enchantment or an artifact, something back. 6 just gives them the way to do it. It also lets us mill 3 when it attacks and put a land from among them back into our hand as well. But I mean, that second ability is just huge because it could attack and get that land back, potentially, but to start getting things back from our graveyard by pitching lands to do it. Remember, that also works really well with something like Life from the Loam, right? Because then you can just get those lands back. Lich Knight's Conquest is a really interesting one. We could sacrifice any number of artifacts, enchantments, or tokens and return that many creatures from our graveyard back to the battlefield. So sack a couple zombie tokens, get some key creatures back can be really useful depending on what we have access to. Squirming Emergence is a great recursion spell. We can get any non-land permanent in our graveyard with mana value less than or equal to the number of permanents in our graveyard. So the bigger our graveyard, the better the things we can get back. Just getting a key thing back at the right time. And then Victimize. We choose 2 creature cards in our graveyard, sacrifice a creature, and get them back on the battlefield tab. Well, we could sacrifice a zombie token, so that's pretty easy. We just go get 2 creatures of our choice, get them right back onto the battlefield. Cursecloth Wrappings not only buffs all of our zombies, which is great because we're going to be making them, but we can give a creature in our graveyard Embalm until end of turn. And basically how Embalm works is you exile that card and pay its Embalm cost to make a token of it. That's copy token of it. That's a zombie. So this is kind of nice because you're still getting it back, and if you have any cards that care about something leaving the graveyard, it's leaving the graveyard because you're exiling it. No, it's not as good as just straight up reanimating it, returning back to your hand with something like Phyrexian Reclamation, which could just get creatures from our graveyard back to our hand. But, I mean, it could be relevant in the sense of being able to do this in conjunction with doing other things, or just getting back a key creature at the right time. And you do get it back as the zombie tokens, while there are things that care about zombies in our deck are going to be able to help them. And I think it's just an overall positive, getting things back if we can't get them back other ways. And then Glacierwood Siege is going to let us play lands from our graveyard on the Sultai angle, which is just great. Being able to play those lands out of our graveyard, making sure that we have access to all of our land drops when we need them. But I think we take this a step further by taking advantage of these zombies that we're making. Crypt Breaker lets us pitch a card, and if we do, we make a zombie creature token. But the ability that's also really nice is to tap 3 untap zombies we control to draw a card and lose a life. So, if they don't block or they're still untapped, by the time it gets around to our opponents, the opponent before us has a turn, well, we could tap them on their turn, right? Draw some cards and then be set up for our turn. Death Baron can just give all of our zombies +1/+1 and Death Touch, just allowing all those tokens be just bigger threats, right, on offensive defense. Diagraph Captain buffs all of their zombies, and then whenever a zombie we control dies, target opponent loses a life. Can just drain out a little bit of life loss for our opponents as we lose zombies, but mainly the buff can be relevant over the course of a game. The Scarab God on our upkeep has each opponent lose X, and we scry X, where X is the number of zombies we control. I mean, again, we're going to make a ton of zombies. And this also gives the option to exile a creature card from anyone's graveyard and make a 4/4 zombie that's a copy of it, which is also really nice to hit our opponent's graveyards as well, while still making us a zombie and just trying to force some pressure on our opponents. Undead Augur, whenever this creature or another zombie we control dies, we draw a card and lose a life. Again, just a way to start churning through our deck if our zombie tokens were to die. Same thing with Wilhelm. Beginning our end step, we could sack a zombie if we do draw a card. And if a zombie we control would die, if it didn't have Decayed, we make a 2/2 zombie count token with Decayed. So we could turn all those 2/2s that Sidisi makes into Decayed zombies, just effectively getting more zombies out of them, right, as we use those zombies for pieces of value. Wand of Orcus can attach to a creature. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we just make that many zombie tokens. And then whenever the equipped creature attacks or blocks, all of our zombies get Death Touch. So we could just give all our zombies Death Touch and make them very questionable to block, right, for our opponents as they deal with it. And then Endless Ranks of the Dead. Beginning of our upkeep, we make X 2/2 zombies, where X is the number of zombies we control rounded down. So again, just making extra zombies every turn as we're doing our graveyard game plan, but also just making zombies in the process. But I've said it before on the show, and I'll say it again, no deck's ever complete. This is my version 1.0 shot at Sidisi. And I think going into testing, I'd mainly want to see, do we have enough things that care about when things leave the graveyard? Tormod makes zombies whenever cards leave our graveyard. Do we have enough ways to get things back out of our to put things in our graveyard or care about our graveyard? My thought was something like White of the Reliquary. You could sack a creature to get a land on the battlefield tapped. Obviously, we're going to have plenty of zombies laying around to do that, which is an interesting idea. I just thought doesn't make a ton of sense if we're trying to just mill, right, all of our cards into our graveyard, but I think white still has some good value. Same thing with a recursion piece like Peerless Recycling, being able to just bring 2 permanents from our graveyard back to our hand. Remember, permanent refers to creatures, artifacts, enchantments, lands, battles, these things that stay on the battlefield, planeswalkers, it could be nice to get 2 of them back for 2 mana at instant speed, if we need to. Say somebody's trying to interact with our graveyard or something like that. Like, we have recursion pieces, but it's something like this at instant speed. You might have to give a card away to do it, but is it worth being able to get these back at the right time, maybe before your turn, right? So you have them in your turn. These are just the ideas of, like, do we need more of these things? Does the deck have enough of it? But let's do the thing we love to do on the channel the most and get into our playtest. Remember, the goal of our playtest on the channel is not to find Magical Christmas Land. It's not to show off all our best plays, but it's to look at some game scenarios and understand how do we set up our board state. Here we're keeping a monster 5-lander with Skull Prophet, a creature that could either tap for mana or mill 2 cards, or that Lich Knight's Conquest. So we have some interesting ways to get things down. My thought is try to get the Skull Prophet down turn 2, right? We now just need to work our way up to Sidisi, which we're going to have this turn, right? Black-green, yep. And so we'll play Sidisi here. Remember, when Sidisi comes in, we mill 3. And we did mill a creature, so that's going to be a zombie token for us. So that's great. Now we've got the process started. We've got some things in our graveyard we can interact with if we need to. Coming back to our next turn. So we saw Sir Conrad, which is great, right? That is an option. Kind of like the idea of like Endless Ranks of the Dead here, because we're going to be able to tap something like Skull Prophet to mill 2. Didn't hit a creature, but that's okay. And then maybe Sidisi can attack, right? Milling 3. We do hit a creature there, so there's another zombie. Now we're at 2 zombies, so we're going to make at least 1 next turn, right? But we had to try. We had to try to get that process started as we continue to fill our graveyard. Coming into the next turn, right, another zombie gets made off the Endless Ranks. So now we have some options. We have that Lich Knight's Conquest, which can bring just creatures back. Timeless Witness can bring any card back for just 4 mana. So the question is, what do we have in there? We have Sir Conrad, we have the Glacier Wood to start playing lands out of our graveyard, but we're good there. We have Entomb, which can go get a specific card and put in our graveyard. Nice for a key creature maybe we want to get back. Nyx Weaver can keep us potentially milling more. Reanimate can just get any creature back. Number of creatures we can get back with Lich Knight's Conquest. So the question is, like, what are we really looking to get back here? And my thought is, if I'm going to run myself towards Lich Knight's Conquest, if we could get Entomb back and Entomb a specific creature into our graveyard so that we could sack these zombies, right, to get them back, if we want to do that. Because right now we'd be getting 1, 2 creatures back, right, or potentially those. So the question, right, is what would make the most sense, from our library, if that's the play we want to do. Otherwise, we could just get something like Nyx Weaver back, and get it down to start milling. Again, Glacierwood Siege wouldn't be bad to start getting lands of our graveyard, but remember, like, we really want to mill. That's the point. And we can mill. If I play the Witness and I get the Entomb back, I can play it while milling, tapping here to mill 2 and attacking with Sidisi to mill 3 more, right? And then we still have a potential chance of just better Lich targets for next turn. So I think that's my thought. Get the Entomb back. We can play the Entomb at any time, but I would tap here to mill 2. And then attack with Sidisi. So there was Wonder. So now we got another, right? Now everything's in the air, which is nice, right? And we control an island. No, we don't. We don't control an island. So that's unfortunately. I hadn't thought about that, but no, we don't control an island. So we would need to try to find an island, right? So that we can flying, which we do. We have a Rampant Growth, so we could find an island that way next turn. But I think we just go ahead and Entomb, and I'm just trying to think of what makes the most sense. Geralf can make the zombies that we have coming in better. Lost Monarch can start getting those creatures back if we want to do that. We could do something like Muldrotha just to really start casting things back out of our graveyard. I think that could be an obvious answer. Lotus Light Dancers is a really interesting one. Allowing us to go get key cards and put them in the graveyard. Colossal Grave Reaper's fun. Milling cards and bringing creatures back as they get milled. A really nice piece of value. I think there's so many options. Will help for the draw. I think I kind of like the Grave Reaver. It's one of those just big pieces that's really good. And then It says that would get us a zombie, right? Because we're putting a creature from our library into the graveyard. And now as we come back to our next turn, we would make 2 zombies, right? Because we have 5 zombie tokens. Play the Hinterland Harbor, we could just go ahead and rampant growth to get that island. So now all of our creatures have flying, right? Making them a nice threat. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 mana left this turn. So we're just 1 off of our, or sorry, 5 because of Skull Prophet. So we could do this immediately, right? We could go get, 1, 2 for that. That could be a future turn thing, right? And then Conrad by sacrificing, a couple zombies. With the Lich Knight's Conquest, right? 1, 2, 3. And then remember the this comes in and mills 3. And so it says whenever 1 or more creatures are put from our graveyard to the library, put 1 of them onto the battlefield. So that mills us 3. That gets us another zombie token. And then we get our choice of either Codis, which can allow us to cast creatures out of our graveyard, or the Undead Augur, which draws us a card when zombies die. I think both are great. I kind of like the idea of the Codis just because it allows us to cast some more things out of our graveyard. Now we got plenty of zombies, right? We have Sir Conrad seeing 2 creatures going there to our graveyard, which would have hit our opponents for 2, and now we're just really starting to build this nice engine of getting things into the graveyard and caring about them as we just continue to get more. As we go. I think that's not a bad place to stop because we kind of got to see some of it. But let's look at another go at it. Here we're keeping a 4-lander with Grapple from the Past, a good way to mill some cards. There's the Ifnir and then Crypt Breaker, which can help us pitch cards to do it. Well, we see the Skull Prophet again, which is interesting, and Entomb. The Prophet makes sense because then we could potentially, play... because we play Sidisi this turn, with the 4 mana, 1, 2, 3, which is going to make us a zombie. So we have that process started. Note that we need to think about ways we can get things back, if we need to. Because Lost Monarch does creature cards from our graveyard back. Well, Entomb can put a specific thing in, so that's kind of nice, We could potentially even do that as early as this turn. If this zombie could get somewhere unblocked, we could go Ifnir into an Entomb and get a key thing back. Mesmeric Orb could be a fun start, just to start milling our opponents a little bit and getting value into our yard. We've got only 1 zombie that can attack this turn, so obviously I don't think the Monarch's the best choice. If I go Orb plus Diagraph Captain, maybe? Giving that zombie a little bit of a buff, and then, having an opponent lose a life if something dies, and then we have to hold there, Because... no, Sidisi can attack this turn. We mill Muldrotha, Grave Troll, and Tainted Wood, which is huge because there's a Dredger, So we could, at the start of this turn, dredge Grave Troll back if we want to, milling 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, which was a creature, so there we go. And now if we have any way to get Grave Troll back into the graveyard, it can be dredged again. Again, we can Entomb to get a specific creature in our graveyard for something like Lost Monarch if we want to. Mesmeric Orb would have milled us, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more? Unfortunately, hits no creatures, which is unfortunate. But I guess it actually technically those would have been the cards that we would have drawn there instead of the ones we originally dredged because of the sequencing there. But it is what it is. It's just a playtest. We can lighten up those things later. I kind of like the idea of trying to do something like this. We're going to mill 3. And we can put a creature land from among them into our hand. We'll put the Waste in there. Now, Wander's in our graveyard. So now we have the chance to potentially get that flying once we get a... Just realized I didn't click next turn, so we'll just put this back. Once we get an island down, right? 3 mana left. I could try to mill 2 again. With the Skull Prophet, I could just do something like, Crypt plus Entomb, just to get another creature in our graveyard, try to get back with the Ifnir next turn, maybe, is my thought. I mean, we already saw, Muldrotha go into our graveyard. We saw Tival go into our graveyard, so we got some interesting options. I like the Dancers because it can get more different things into our graveyard. Remember, Codis, right, helps us get things back. There's Conrad. I'm not entirely sure, and this is where I think playing the deck lets you know what your targets are. My thought is just something like Grave Reaper, just to, again, get some big value for future turns. So then as we come to our next turn, untap. We would untap 4, 5, I think. So there's 2 more. Then draw. And now my thought is the Monarch. There's a good chance one of these, a couple that could attack, hits this turn. And then my thought is get the Grave Reaper back. We're only at 7 mana, 8 mana though, so we could eventually play it. My thought was also something like going for something like Muldrotha instead, because then that way we can just play more out of our graveyard. And again, I think now we're in a good spot of having this value set up as we're working our way towards it. Now, to say the thing that people are probably thinking, if somebody wipes at this point, now I've got something like Muldrotha to put down to keep playing things back in my graveyard after, some of this goes away. That's the kind of nice thing about this deck is if somebody does truly wipe the board, as long as we're holding back a piece or two of a way to get things back, we might still have a good way to get value back on the board even after people putting a ton of stuff into our graveyard. We'll go for one more playtest, keeping a 3-lander with Mesmer or Glarb, Timeless Witness, and Kaga. So very interesting start, right? Hopefully we can go with, I think it's something like Glarb here. Do we want to go with the Mesmer Orb now? I don't know that I want to just quite yet. I like the idea of getting something like Glarb down, then getting something like Sidisi down. We did get a creature there, so that is a zombie for us. And as we come to our next turn, now it feels like it could be fun to get some pieces down to mill, since we do have some ways to get things back with Kaga and Timeless Witness. I think I'll start with tapping Glarb to Surveil 2. Let's see what we get. 2 lands. Well, I kind of want both of them, right? So now it's kind of awkward to attack with Sidisi because we would just get rid of both these lands, and we kind of want the lands, right? Or to some degree. I guess Grapple can mill 3 cards and put a land from among them into our hand. So we could, I guess, dump one into our graveyard and have a better chance to hit the land we want to do it, because then we could grapple, mill 3, get the Cemetery back and play it. That's right. We've got 3 mana. I don't mind something like Wand of Orcus to get it attached to Sidisi. I don't mind something like the Mesmeric Orb just to start milling some more. We could do something like Altered Dimension, a nice way to mill either ourselves or our opponents out, depending on our creatures. But it may not be a bad idea to start milling more, especially now that we have that Lich Knight's Conquest to get stuff back. So maybe it is something like Mesmeric Orb attack to mill 3. We saw more than one creature, so zombie token. Come back to our turn. We would untap 7. I counted 3. And we don't have an island just yet, so Wonder's not going to be as easy. But there's the Forbidden Landscape, so that can actually go get us that island. So now all of our creatures have flying, right? But we could, Lich Knight and just get some of these creatures back. I'm thinking, 1, 2, 3 is my thought. So, right, kill 3, get 3 of the zombies. 1, 2, 3. Now Muldrotha opening up our graveyard. The Reaver comes in and mills us 3. another zombie, and then Skull Prophet back. I think we're in some solid shape here, right? Conrad could start hitting our opponents for some damage there, right? Now when we're milling, right, things are coming back. So, Sidisi could mill us. Kotis gets to come back because of the Grave Reaver. And now we're setting up this nice value engine as we're milling. Again, working our way towards something like Timeless Witness, which could get the Lich Knights back again if we needed it to. There's a lot of options in just getting a card from your graveyard back to your hand. A very interesting ability, right? But again, Muldrotha unlocks us playing lands and casting permanents from our graveyard. Kotis lets us play some creatures. I mean, there's great options now on the board that we've kind of built up for ourselves. But let me know, what do you think of Sidisi down in the comment section below. We do have the Taval from the Commander deck, like I said, coming up later in the week. We have Self-Mill Taval, the Delve Taval coming. So there's some more interesting Sultai options coming this week. I hope you'll check them out, and I will catch you in the next one.